Good evening.
Hi, Ross.
Hello.
There we go. Checking to see if we've got Facebook running. Looks like we do. It's a blustery day today.
Yes, that's for sure. Cold.
We'll see if anyone else joins us. This is one of those days that you kind of go, yeah, maybe I'll go to bed early.
Not this early.
Get a warm blanket and a cup of tea and curl up. But we're here.
That's right.
And that's good. We're the people who persevere.
How many weeks is this series?
We got one more week.
Oh, okay.
And it has it's really been kind of interesting for me anyway, because I think I've come to a bit of a revelation during this series, and that is I think Zoom is worth it if people are comfortable using Zoom.
Right.
Facebook is too difficult because it's just too hard to interact. I appreciate the people who listen in and persevere and try to utilize Facebook. I really do. And the morning devotions works just fine for Facebook, but to do a Bible study where you have any kind of discussion, you either have to have it in person or Zoom. And people who do Zoom have to have a certain comfort level with it.
Yeah, ever since the pandemic, I've had a lot of different meetings with Zoom, like the redevelopment commission and a lot of that kind of stuff. The rail committee, all those kind of meetings are all being held on Zoom. So it's not a problem at all, to use it. But I understand where some people might, have a problem with it. Oh, Master Gardener meetings were all on Zoom during the pandemic. So,
Yeah.
I'd rather be in
So
person,
you're used to it.
Rather be in person, but this way you don't have to drive. At least I don't have to drive into LaPorte and things for it. So it's okay for me.
Yeah.
Is that a Thomas Kincaid?
When there's distance involved, I think it is a really good,
Right.
Good system to use.
Right.
Excuse me.
Is that a Kincaid over your right shoulder there?
No.
Okay.
These are both of these paintings are done by a Civil War artist.
Oh.
And that one is of the Lutheran Seminary. John Buford, we've got somebody else on. Let me get them clicked in. That one is from depicting John Buford, the very first day of the Battle of Gettysburg.
Okay.
Buford was the guy who essentially picked where the battle was going to be. And I liked it because I think it's called Morning Riders. They arrived early in the day on July 1st. And he used the Lutheran Seminary, the cupola on the top of the Lutheran Seminary, to kind of get a lay of the land. And then he distributed his forces to, I guess you would say, slow the Confederates from getting into Gettysburg.
Huh.
And so I always looked at him as kind of an example of, get there early, get a lay of the land, and, do your best to hold off the enemy. And I always say that's kind of the job of a pastor. The other one is a picture of Robert E. Lee during, nobody likes Robert E. Lee anymore. A picture of Robert E. Lee during winter, and it's just a really good picture, also by the same artist. And I kind of Lee was a gentleman. He was a Pastor Chris of generals. Just a decent man and
Right.
a warrior, no doubt. But he was conflicted. He was conflicted between, serving his state, and as Southerners, the state was your country in a sense, and so he did his best to protect his country, or Virginia. He did have a couple of slaves, one manservant, and he was on the wrong side,
Right.
but he was still a man of dignity. And there's a story about General Lee that I always appreciated, I guess. And that story was, after the Civil War, he went to communion one Sunday at the Episcopal Church. And as he went to communion, there was a black person that went up to take communion, and none of the other white people in the church would go to communion. And General Lee went up and kneeled beside the black man that went to communion, which was an example, I think, of great magnanimity, and just saying the war is over. The North has won, slavery is ended.
Right.
And
you mentioned that no one liked him. When you started, and that was really true, because he owned a lot of property just outside of Washington, D.C., including a big house, kind of like the one in that picture, and they turned it into Arlington Cemetery.
That's right. The Union came across the river, the Potomac, and took over his property, and he lost it. He lost it all.
Yes.
So anyway, well, let's get started. Hopefully you have your study guides, and I'm looking to see on Facebook, we don't really have, I don't know if there's a problem with Facebook or not, but I see 3 people have joined us, and we'll do our best to include people. Don't forget to comment if you were on Facebook and give us input. I'm going to talk about personality tonight, but before we get started, I want to say hi to everybody this evening. It's so good to see you. Diane is there. How are you, Diane?
Good, thank you.
Excellent. And I see Jim and Christy are there. Good to see you guys.
Yeah, we're among the sacrificial lambs on Zoom.
Very good. Very good. I love this. Russ and I were talking about this before you guys got on, that I really appreciate Zoom a lot in comparison to Facebook. Not that I don't love my Facebook friends, but the problem with Facebook is that it's really, really hard to interact. And it's hard to, and I have to look at something here. Try and get, there we go. I want to say hi to Ben, who's out there. Hi, Ben. And so thanks for joining me this evening, and thanks to everybody who's on Facebook. And I think going forward, I'm only going to do 2 forms, I think, of Bible study, and one is going to be Zoom and one is going to be in person, because there's a time delay with Facebook. It's just not a platform that works effectively unless it's a lecture. If it's a lecture or just me presenting something, it's fine, but it's very hard to get any interaction. Just like, asking the whatever the number of people are right now, it says only 1 person is on Facebook. So I don't know whether it's connected, whether people are just not there tonight or what's going on. But let's start with prayer. Gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day and for the personalities that we have, and what those personalities do to enhance ways in which we serve you and serve others. Bless our conversation this evening. In Jesus' name, amen. So I want to start out with that passage from 1 Samuel 16, verse 7. But the Lord said to Samuel, do not consider his appearance or his height, for I've rejected him. The Lord does not look at the things people look at. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. So I've never thought, I don't have the beautiful coiffed hair of the TV preacher. And I don't have the eloquence of some of those who have gone before me in the preaching profession. And I guess I consider myself kind of just a humble servant trying to do a job. But I think culture very often looks at outward things rather than the inward qualities of people. Would you agree with me?
Yes.
Yes. Mhm.
Definitely.
I think one study I read one time said that height is a person's height has a lot to do with their success, which I always thought that seems strange. But if you look out through history, other than maybe Napoleon, height really does make a difference in terms of the way people are judged. Another thing would be male and female. Very often men have had great success, and women have been seen as, well, their place is not in business or in the pulpit or anywhere else. So what does God look at? God looks at what's in our heart. God looks at who we are. And if you look through the New Testament, there were a number, let's just take women, for instance, a number of women who were very influential in the church. Aquila and Priscilla, who was a male and female husband and wife, were very influential in Paul's ministry. And you can go down Mary and Martha, very influential in Jesus' ministry. Mary, the mother of Jesus, very influential in the church. So you look at the women, and then the apostles, look at them. You have one who is a sort of a hot-headed fisherman as Peter, and he becomes the kind of head of the disciples. You got Matthew, the tax collector, who is kind of a numbers guy and not really, maybe not as extroverted as the others. Then you got James and John, also very kind of pushy, exuberant people. Nathaniel, who's a little more laid back. So, and then Judas, who was obviously not trustworthy. So our personalities are really a gift from God. And I think that's what First Samuel was saying, that God looks at what's in here. So let's go through these this study. And the world places value on externals. Prestige, position, wealth. Those are just three things, for instance, that are very influential. Seldom do you see today, for instance, in politics, someone who's just an ordinary, say, businessman or farmer or, entrepreneur running for office, because it takes literally millions of dollars, right?
Mhm.
And so most of the people in office today are millionaires, where they were farmers, they were businessmen, they were newspaper people. They didn't look at politics as their profession. They looked at politics as a way of serving. Same with the church. We look at our personalities. How do they play a role in what we do? God places the highest value on less visible aspects of our lives. Think about that. He's looking at a special quality within you that is particular to who you are. The personality you have is God's gift to you. So have you ever thought about your personality as a gift? I think a lot of people mistake that and don't think about their personality as a gift of God. But in reality, it very much is a gift. So I think right now I want to jump down to that how do I relate to others section and kind of go through that with you. All right. So do you have that? Do you have your study guide in front of you?
Yes,
Yes.
Okay.
yes. Mhm.
So on a scale, so looking at the word outgoing and looking at the word reserved, the number closest to outgoing would be what you would circle. And the number closest to reserved is what you would circle. Where would you place yourself on that scale from 1 to 20? And I'll
I
start
circled
out
14.
with Russ.
I
Where did you put
circled
it?
14.
14.
Mhm.
So you're right, kind of in the middle. Okay. A little more towards the reserve side. How about you, Jim?
5.
5. Definitely agree. You're a very outgoing person. Absolutely. One of the people I admire most at joke telling. Christy, how about you?
I put 9.
You put 9. Also agree with that. Very outgoing person. How about you, Ben?
I'd say 8.
Okay. You're a little more towards the outgoing type. I agree with that. And then Diane, how about you?
20 is reserved.
Uh-huh.
21.
Okay. That's all right.
I'd say I'm pretty close to like 18 or something. I'm pretty, yeah.
Well, I mean, in our noontime Bible study, we found the same thing. People were all over the place in this regard. Let's go to self-expressive, people who are really willing to express themselves. So in terms of self-expressive versus self-controlled, where are you at? So I'll start with Diane this time.
I'm more towards the self-control.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ben, how about you?
The closest thing to self-controlled is 20. I'd say
Yes.
I'm probably around 15 or 16.
Okay. All right. And Russ?
I put 14.
All right. So we got a pretty controlled bunch here so far. Jim, how about you?
6.
Aha. And Christy?
Well, it depends on what group I'm in.
Ah,
It really does. I think at certain groups, I'm much more self-controlled, probably in large groups and things like that. Self-expressive and in friend groups and small groups, I'm much more expressive.
I
So
think you bring up a very important point. I think we do vary to a certain extent in terms of our personalities, depending on the group that we're in. Most definitely. How about cooperative versus competitive? This is a good one. Russ, you're a pretty competitive bowler.
Well, I guess when I looked at this, I didn't necessarily see those two words as being opposites because I felt, you can be very competitive, but still be cooperative. And you can still be cooperative and still be competitive, I guess. So I didn't really know where to go with that one because I didn't feel that those were like at opposite ends of a scale, I guess. I don't know. That's just maybe the way I interpreted it, but I didn't feel that those were opposite each other.
I think that's a good observation. I think maybe a different way of saying that would be somebody who is competitive versus somebody who does everything to get people to get along. Sometimes people who are very competitive really don't care that much about people cooperating, getting along.
I'd probably be a 20 at that point.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. I think we see. So I consider myself to be a very competitive person, but I'm very concerned about people working together. So I have these two, I wouldn't say personality types, but I see both ends of that spectrum in terms of my job as a pastor, that I'm a very competitive person, but I also see where I have to bring people along with me. So I have to cooperate with people in order to achieve my objectives. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Ben, where did you put yourself on that?
14.
Okay. So kind of toward the competitive side, but also someone who understands importance of cooperation. Diane, how about you?
On the cooperative side.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jim?
Well, I started out as a 6 until I listened to Russ, and then I moved over to a 10, but I could be a 14, so it sort of depends. No, really,
Sure.
sort of like you did.
Right. Maybe in our personal life, or maybe in our individual lives, and I think we differentiate sometimes with our job, or with a group that we're in, or with the church that we serve, and so on. Christy, how about you? Where were you at?
I put 14 down,
Okay.
kind of in the middle, I guess.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's right there. A little more towards the competitive side. You're hardworking, very achievement oriented. So I think those things are true. Now we move to how we respond to opportunities. So this was interesting because this noon, because Carrie was in the group, Carrie Garwood. And so you can almost predict some of these. So where did you put yourself on a scale from high risk to low risk? Christy, where did you put yourself?
7.
Okay, pretty
Wow.
far over to the
Maybe.
risk-taking category. Oh, that's okay. Good deal. Diane, where were you at?
I'm pretty low on the risk.
Low risk?
Conservative, yeah.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right. Ben?
An 8.
An 8?
Yeah.
So definitely more towards the risks side of things.
Mhm.
How about you, Jim?
I'm sort of right in the middle, the 10.
All right. And Russ, how about you?
17.
17. So you made a good banker.
That's right.
Willing to look at situations, but a little more conservative in that respect. That's okay. I mean, can you see how your personalities reflect kind of how you live that out? Now, we get to people driven versus project driven. By the way, I put myself in terms of the high risk right around a 6 or 7. So I'm willing to take risks, but I also am very concerned about the next one, people versus projects. And I think this is a real important one in terms of our personalities.
Yeah.
Both of these are really critical, but in different ways. So where do you put yourself on the people-driven scale versus a project-driven scale? And I'll start with you, Jim.
I think I'm more project driven, really. I put myself 17.
All right. Strong opinion on that. Okay. Ben?
12.
Okay. Kind of in the middle there. Diane?
I'm much more closer to people driven.
It doesn't surprise me from knowing you. Christy?
15.
15.
Mhm, yeah.
Yeah, when you see yourself aiming towards helping other people, doing things for other people, building things, organizing things, it's a project kind of orientation. But most of you, I'm guessing, if you're project oriented, it's a project that benefits others.
Yeah.
So people are still important. You're focused on the project, but it has to be a project that might benefit people.
Mhm.
How about you, Russ?
I did 12.
12. So kind of right down the middle there, Russ. Now we get down to the nitty gritty here. Being a follower versus a leader, where'd you put yourself on the scale? Russ, start out.
18.
Pretty strong. And that's been your course, kind of working with teens and young people with bowling and certainly.
Yeah, I never belonged to any organization, club, or anything that I wasn't the president of at some point in time.
Yeah, Lions, all those things. Yeah,
Lions, YMCA, Master Gardeners.
I can definitely
everything.
see that.
Yeah.
Now, I had somebody today in the group at noon say that they had strong leadership qualities, but they didn't like to do it. I thought that was interesting. So, but I could see that, maybe people get tired of being the leader all the time. Ben, where were you?
I do want to say that I think the best presidents are the ones that didn't want to be president. So maybe there's some truth to that.
Yeah.
But for me, I'd probably say about 14.
Okay. Sometimes you can see yourself leading within a team of people versus leading in a corporation or a large group. So sometimes that you can differentiate a little bit there. Christy, how about you?
I said 14.
Okay, Jim?
I want Russ to get out of the way. I'm 18.
Move over, Russ. Diane?
I think my introvert personality puts me much closer to being more comfortable in a following position.
Mm-hmm. And that's okay, because I think it's having balance in any team or any group or any church. That balance is real important in achieving success. It really is. You have to have both. Just out of curiosity, where would you guys put me on the scale?
22.
Yeah. Way up there.
Yes.
I would agree.
It's interesting because I'm believe it or not, I feel more like a creative person rather than a leader person. You're sort of thrust into leadership roles. I like the creativity and the teaching part of what I do more than the out front carry the flag kind of things. But sometimes you you just end up there, right? And so you have to take the mantle, whether it's your thing or not, and kind of leave it up to God. Now, this goes to the next one, team versus solo. Now, interestingly enough, when you think about pastors in general, would you think of pastors more as extroverted?
Yes.
Which one?
Extrovert.
Which would you think of most pastors? Are they introverted or extroverted?
Extrovert.
Oh,
Extrovert.
yeah, extroverts.
The majority of pastors that have been in a number of different studies like Pew Research, things like that, are introverts.
Huh.
And the reason is, think about this. They spend the majority of their preparation for becoming a pastor doing what?
Studying.
Studying, going to school, doing research, sitting in classes. So what kind of people are best in those situations? Introverts.
Introverts.
But what happens is they get into ministry and they're almost forced into an extroverted position. So this is why you see a lot of pastors who may be very good speakers, but they are loners. Otherwise, they're not social. They're not sociable. They don't like being around people. Not that it's good or bad. I'm just saying that I think we look at things
Oh, yeah.
in different ways, and we say, well, I'm kind of off the scale in terms of extroversion. I'm the guy who gets on the elevator and turns his back to the doors and faces
Yeah.
it and starts talking to them. They are all uncomfortable. It's like, I get on an elevator in Chicago and I say, well, you wonder why I've gathered you here. But over time, I think if you would look at me when I was in high school, I was very shy.
Mhm.
But over time, I've kind of overcome that. And there are still times when I just get burned out by being around people, and I've got to get away and I got to be by myself. So we all are a mix to a certain extent. But if we look at team versus solo, that's another way. Sometimes some of us are really, really good working on our own. And sometimes people are more team oriented. So where would you see yourself in that regard, Russ?
I did a 12 on that.
Okay. Diane?
I'm most comfortable working solo, but I also value input of team.
Yeah. Okay. And Ben?
Probably a 9.
All right. So a little more towards the team end of things. Christy?
I put 15.
All right. And Jim?
14.
Really? Okay. There's that old saying, if you want something done right, you do it yourself. Sometimes people who are a little bit more on the project-driven leadership end of things tend to also like working solo. Does that make sense? You want to get it done.
Yep.
So you move ahead. And sometimes you don't look back and see who's behind you. And then there are the people who watch where everybody's going and get out in front and pretend to lead. So, I mean, there are different kinds of personalities, as you can see. And then the last one is routine versus variety. Where would you put yourselves on the scale for routine kind of activities versus a variety of activities? Christy?
I put 15.
Okay. Ben?
Was routine closer to 20 or 1?
Routine was closer to the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7,
Okay.
8, 9, 10.
I'd probably say about a 4.
Okay. Russ?
I was right in the middle on that. I put 10 because even though one of the things I liked when I was working was I never knew what to expect when I walked in the morning. it was always going to be something different. I still pretty much, like most people, you don't always like a lot of change. And so I think you like a routine to a certain degree also. So.
Diane?
I'm much more comfortable with routine, but I also appreciate variety, as motivation to keep with the routine.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're kind of back and forth on those.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jim?
Definitely like change. I'm 17.
Yeah. Strong on variety.
Yeah.
Well, we see all of these different characteristics. And when you go up to the part that says personality there, the personality, our personality is the complex characteristics that distinguish us as individuals. And an indisputable truth is that God instilled a unique personality in each of us. So everybody is different. Now, there's an old saying that people are more alike than they are different. I don't think that's true. I really don't. I think people are more different than they are alike.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's God's design. I think we all have a kind of uniqueness to us, a uniqueness to our personality, uniqueness to where we fit in. And really, the exercise of doing this has a lot to do with how and where we serve, and recognizing what our strength of personality is. If you're an introvert, you're not going to be the person that stands at the door and greets everybody that comes in. If you are, somebody who is project driven, you might be really great in heading up a program, being in charge of a program, especially if you have some leadership abilities. A couple 3, 4, 5 years here, and we have to put a new roof on the church. Maybe Ben is the guy to head that up. Project driven and a little bit of competitiveness. Yeah, I'm just saying, look at your personalities and say, this is where I'm good at this, and I'm comfortable with this. Diane, you're a person who is resilient and a real prayer warrior out there, somebody who cares very much about people, and who can be really praying for what's going on in the life of the church, and be influential in that regard. I'm trying to figure out tonight. I have not seen a single comment on Facebook tonight, and I do not almost always have several comments. So I'm a little bit puzzled. There may have been a glitch tonight. I don't know. So, when you think about how you relate to others and how you respond to opportunities, I think this is really a key for you to analyze what you get into, right? But to recognize that all personalities have value and they're worthwhile. And God can use every single personality, because there's so many different things that have to get accomplished in the church. So going down to that question after that section of where we circle our answers, how does your personality help you fulfill your kingdom purpose? And maybe that's a question that needs a little more time and a little more reflection. But I've thought about this a lot and continue to think about it. I think it changes over time,
Yeah.
because when you're in your 20s, your kingdom purpose might be quite different than when you're in your 70s, right? So it's okay. So I think in every season of our life, I always tell people that about every 5 or 6 years, I do a real concerted evaluation of where I'm at in terms of my service to the church. And up till now, God's always said, yeah, I like where you're at. Keep doing what you're doing. But there definitely is a certain cadence to our lives, and we have to look periodically and say, where am I? What's my personality like? Where do I fit in? How can I serve? And I'll give you an example of this. Ted Taylor called me up, actually stopped by a couple weeks ago. And he said, I know you asked about someone to visit shut-ins. Now, Ted was an insurance agent, a lot of corporate insurance. And he said, I'm pretty comfortable with visiting people. And I have an aunt who's at Settler's house. And is there somebody that you'd like me to visit? And I'm like,
Wow.
yes. So Gordon is usually with us on our studies, and Ted went over to visit Gordon. And I was so thankful for him doing that, because I've been super busy here. I've had weddings and I've had a couple of funerals and just haven't been making it as much as I've wanted to out on visits. So Ted is in a different season of his life. He's retired from his main job as an insurance guy. And he said, I'm going to step up and I'm going to do this. I'm going to help out. I'm going to go visit somebody. In my younger years as a pastor, one of the things I really love to do, because there's a competitive nature to my life, is I really liked putting together a softball team for the church. It sounds sort of silly, but I liked athletics. I like getting together with people, and softball was a lot of fun. And I could see somebody who likes golf or who likes softball, or and maybe has other interests. There was a guy in my church in Kansas City who really, really liked camping. And so one of the things that he did was every year he took the confirmation kids, the junior high youth, on a camping trip. It was just a weekend trip. And he asked me to come along, as I was the assistant pastor then, youth pastor. And so we went on a camping trip, and he used that as a way of creating formation for kids. And who doesn't like a good campfire, And he was a scout leader too, so it was natural for him. He could get tents and get sleeping bags, and he put this thing together. And another guy who he was not good at a lot of things, and he goes, I can drive a bus. I have my CDL license. If you ever want to go on a trip, I know where I can rent a bus and take the youth group. And so I used his talents to take the youth group down to what's the name of the place? Down in Branson, Missouri. There's a theme park down there, which I can't think of the name of right now. Silver Dollar City. And so every spring we would take a trip down to Silver Dollar City, and we would stay down there. In fact, they usually had a concert, and they had a lot of activities. And they had a cave in the park. So I always got kids to go spelunking with me through the cave. And about 50% of them would go with me, and about 50% decided not to. But think about all the different, so the bus driver wasn't what I would call an extrovert, but he was a talented CDL driver and he was willing to do something. Russ, you were real involved with Habitat for Humanity. Habitat for Humanity is really kicking off again in LaPorte.
Yes.
And so I think there's a chance for people who have some building skills, or at least some organizational skills for Habitat. I think they're supposed to build like 5 houses in LaPorte on some land the city gave. That's big.
Mm-hmm.
And Bethany one year took on an entire build project. We organized it and paid for it. In fact, that was the first time, I should have got a glass of water tonight. That was the first time we ever had a Harley raffle. Raffled off a Harley Davidson motorcycle, and we paid for the house, which I thought was pretty cool.
Mhm.
And a lot of people sold tickets to their friends, and we raised money. So different talents, different aspects. So when you think about fulfilling your kingdom purpose, maybe I'll ask, how have you, or how can you see yourself doing that, either in the past or future? Russ, I think you're in a lot of ways right now, you're doing it through working on the foundation.
Yes.
But that
And I
time
did
you're
it-
going to have to take a break from that pretty soon
Right.
because of the bylaws. So that now is maybe a point at which you reevaluate, where do those skills shift to? Ben, you're
was
young. Go ahead, Russ.
It was with Rebuilding Together for a while too. Of course,
That's right.
But I'll have to, have to think about that.
Yeah, Rebuilding Together, unfortunately, kind of lost some momentum there, sadly.
Yes.
And the board just sort of fell apart. But maybe and there were people that were good on it, but nobody wanted to lead. There was an organization that died for lack of leadership. Ben, how have you, or how can you see yourself doing this, fulfilling your kingdom purpose in the future? You mentioned finding the right person, having a family. That's certainly a part of it.
Yeah, I think also just over the past, 2 years working Red Wine and Brew and just getting more involved with the church and continuing to find more ways to volunteer my time there.
Yeah, experimenting a little bit, trying
Mhm.
different things. Absolutely. I think that's a great, I think that's really important when we're in our young adult years, to try different things and experiment with it. Diane, I know you've been a little more restricted in terms of travel and getting out, but how have you, I know for sure that one of the ways you've done that is through study and reflection and prayer.
Yes. And I appreciate the series because it has raised my awareness of that I may have potential gifts, and trying to listen to God's voice and to hear what directions that he sort of points me into.
I'm looking here at Dave and Beth Hepner. For a season in their life, they mentioned that they're on board with us tonight on Facebook. Dave and Beth were actually missionaries in India. Now they were educational missionaries, but they were bringing gospel tracts and as teachers helping develop educational systems while they were in India, which, man, I mean, that would be, if I were going to rewind the clock to when I was in seminary, I think I would have loved to have served in a mission capacity. I have a friend who was a radio minister in Brazil. And I thought that would have been so cool. He was down there for about 15 years doing radio ministry in Brazil. Now, it didn't hurt that he was also fluent in Portuguese and Spanish. But, you think about the things with everybody. When I was in high school, everybody told me French is the language of the world. Take French.
Yeah, they did. Mhm.
You probably heard that too.
So
I never use my French. I don't even use my French at a French restaurant because they usually have a translation. And the one time that I was in Paris and I got off the plane and I said to one of the flight attendants, bonjour. They looked at me and they said, you can speak English. All right.
Yep, that's the French.
Well, you're in a different season of your life, Jim and Christy, where, how do you see, obviously you guys were really influential as we tried to proceed through this connection with the NALC versus ELCA. You did a lot of thinking, a lot of praying, a lot of work on that. Your family now is really crucially important. Your grandkids, seeing to it that they're, that you infuse them with, your love of God. That's real important.
Right. Let's see. Some ways that I think I and we have fulfilled is taking care of people. We have had our parents. We've had, and that was 6 people, not just 4.
Right.
And we've had my Aunt Lucille, and I have a friend coming up here who's going to get a new knee, and I'm going to be really helping her a lot. And I don't know, just things that come up like that. And I'm comfortable doing that. I really am.
Yeah, I think that's a fair way of looking at things. Diane, you mentioned this too, is just listening for God's direction, being responsive to what God asks us to do. I think that's a very, very fair assessment of looking at how you'll fulfill your kingdom purpose. Because sometimes God will ask you to do something and it's like, really? And then you do it. And you know that it was the right thing to do. Yeah, good point. You want to add anything to that, Jim?
Well, I concur with Christy, but and I had written down finding the right fit. That's what, in something. But I've been asking God lately, tell me what you want me to do. And I got a call from Gary Whelan today, who is on a panel determining the, what is it? Infant mortality in the
county.
In the county, which is the worst in Indiana. Wow. And he said Indiana is the worst in the country.
Oh my gosh, really?
And so I told Gary, I said, well, I think this is the answer to my prayer, because this is what he wants to do right now. So I'm going to be on a board that reviews statistics monthly and tries to figure out how we can improve that. A lot of them are happen when parents are sleeping in a small bed and they roll over on the baby in between them and stuff.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I had to deal with that with a family once.
Yeah.
A kind
But
of a
anyway,
SID situation.
I'm not really sure what my kingdom purpose is, but I'll
Well,
take
that
this.
certainly is part of it.
Yeah.
That's certainly part of it. I think of, I mean, that's sort of surprising, shocking in a way to me, but we think of the multiple things that affect infants these days, drugs, alcohol,
Yeah, right, right.
poverty in Gary and Indianapolis in particular. Rural areas though, too, very affected by it. And a lot of rural areas around Indiana, the drug problems, crack and other drugs are terrible. And there's a lot of childhood neglect and abuse that takes place. So having served on Dunebrook, I'll tell you, if you ever know anybody who wants to get involved with Dunebrook and the child abuse prevention, I served on that board for 6 years, and that's an eye-opening thing. So sometimes board service doesn't look all that glamorous, but as you know, those of you who have served on a board before, it can be very rewarding, and also you gain a lot of insights there. Well, I forgot my paper at church when I came home, and I texted Carrie as to did she grab her paper and take it with her. So she actually took a photo of her paper and sent it to me, which I thought was pretty revealing as I looked at that. And on this one question, I said, if you had the chance to choose the ideal opportunity that would enable you to make the greatest difference for God, what would it look like? And she wrote, constantly searching. And I thought, well, that makes sense, doesn't it? That is her. But isn't that really all of us? And maybe
Yeah.
that's where we'll end tonight, is this idea that we are searching and we do want to listen.
That's good.
And respond when God asks us to do stuff, and not just sit back and wait, but really listen and say, here's something I can do. Here's a way in which I can contribute. I mentioned there's a lady in the congregation who's a widow, and I've never thought of her as extravagantly wealthy, but she's just a phenomenal giver. I mean, it's eye-popping. I'm like, how does she do this? And I'm not gonna call her up, and she's not on our study, but I'm not gonna call her up and ask her, how do you do this? How are you able to do this? Because that's really between her and God. But she has a gift of giving, and this is something that she obviously loves to do. She's not particularly a world traveler. She lives very modestly, but she has some resources. This is what she does. Comes to worship and extravagant giver. And so you think about that, or you think about somebody who is always like Norma Saby. Norma's just always working. By the way, she's getting over COVID right now. And so I had to set up communion. Believe me, I'm glad she does this every Sunday, because, it takes some time. She does it every week, sets up communion, takes it down, changes the paraments, things like that. Always working, always behind the scenes. Nobody's out there going, yay, Norma, way to go, Norma. It's just quiet behind the scenes, just does her job. And I just admire people that, find a place, find their niche, and that's what they do. Another person that I've known, and I love the quiet behind the scenes stuff sometimes, because they don't get notoriety, but there was a lady in the congregation who just sent every month sent out a Only thing she asked for were stamps, but she would send a note to every shut-in every month.
Oh,
And there were probably, when she was doing that, she did it for about, I don't know, somewhere between 5 and 10 years. And imagine that, every week, 52 weeks a year. Stamps were cheaper back then, but it was just the thing she did. Thinking of you, praying for you. She'd say, she'd have a list of their birthdays, send them a special note on their birthday. So you think about these little things that happen behind the scenes. I have there's a member of the congregation who nearly every week sends me an email about my sermon. And she'll say, I look like this about you, made me think about that. This was really helpful. And she just sends me this email, and it's just one of those things that I'm like, oh my gosh, she really took the time to write to me about what the sermon was. Very few people do that. A lot of people will come out and say, good job, Pastor, nice sermon, good sermon, whatever. But she actually goes home, and it's usually like on a Monday or Tuesday. I get it. She's thought about it for like 2 days. I can't even remember what I preached about. And she remembers. So think about all the ways in which, when God says, this is what you can do, and it clicks and you do it and you feel fulfilled. I'll throw a big word at you. There's a plethora of things that you can do to honor God. So one more week. Wrap it up next week. Thanks for joining me tonight on Zoom. Thanks for all my friends on Facebook that are out there. Appreciate you. Sherry and Beth and David, and whoever is out there nameless, thank you for the thumbs up. Thank you for the hearts. And hope you join me next week as well. God bless you guys.
Dennis?
Any final thoughts?
Yeah. While we were sitting here, I signed on to Facebook. I had my phone here, and it showed there were 5 different people out there on Facebook.
All right. Good deal.
Oh, and by the way, a divine commemoration it's a commemoration of divine assistance. Ebenezer.
The Ebenezer. Yes. You remember? Good job from the song, the very first hymn. I raised my Ebenezer. Yeah. I did that as a kind of a test for everybody at the first service. It wasn't in the hymn at the second service.
Oh, okay.
It was a more modern take on that hymn. But nobody knows what an Ebenezer is, so thank you for that. Say it again, Russ.
The commemoration of divine assistance.
It could be a rod or a staff or something that commemorates. Excellent. Good job. Have a great night, everybody.
Right.
Love you
Night,
guys.
Dennis.
Night,
Bye-bye.
night, everybody.